Welcome to episode 24 of the Psoriasis Geek podcast. I'm your host, Gemma Berg, and today we're talking to co-host Russ about something that affects quite a lot of us, and that is seasonal flaring. So my time for being vulnerable for this is now. I'm recording this in March 2019. And Russ has a very interesting story because he flares around October time, which is much more common. So what we're going to do in today's conversation is touch on some of the reasons we might start flaring in different seasons, and also talk through some of the strategies that we use to try to help minimize that. So I hope you get a lot out of today's interview. There is a small section where I jump on at the end, just to share some really interesting findings about a study on vitamin D, which relates to seasonal flaring both in March and October. So I hope you stick around to the very end. So without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with the wonderful Russ. So for me, my stressful month is March. So growing up, I would have said I didn't have a trigger season. But then in my 30s, I flared every March for 4 years in a row. 2 of those flares were strep-induced. So I definitely say that March is a stressful time for me. And I know that you flare at a different time of year to me, don't you, Russ?
Yeah, I'm generally October, November. And I'm not alone. Quite often my flares end me up in hospital in Salford Royal, and I tend to see the same people year in, year out. And I have a sort of standing joke with the girls at Salford Royal on the ward. That it's like my timeshare. I go every year for a couple of weeks. But for the last couple of years, I've not actually been in. So I've got through this winter okay, and didn't really. I had a bit of a flare, but nothing as serious as what I normally have. So I'm quite pleased with that, really. But yeah, October for me. I think as soon as the weather starts to change, the dark nights start coming, I start to wear more clothes because it's cold. I might put the heating on. So obviously, like, central heating, that dries the skin out because obviously you've got psoriasis and I feel the cold more now because my skin's not so good. Probably all contributing factors. And plus it's also... I think because it gets dark and I become a bit more miserable, me. I don't know about you, but I'm like, oh, God, I can't be doing with this. Manchester, it's raining, it's cold, it's damp. And I think I've got to put creams on, I've got to do this and I've got to do that just to go to the shops. And sometimes I think, I just can't be bothered. I just want to lie in bed. No, not go out. And I think that's probably a contributing factor as well, in a way.
Yeah.
But I've also... I had a few flares in March, and I do think it may be a change of seasons thing. You know, and I have asked doctors about this, and they've gone, yeah, I did not really. I don't think they've ever really considered it because I've had a few spring flares that have been quite bad, but nowhere near as bad as autumn. And usually, summer I settle down quite well, and winter I settle down quite well. You know, I can't think of a time I've been in hospital in December and January, and I can't think of a time I've been in hospital in July and August. So my months are definitely April, May, and October, November. So what's your month then?
So March is my month.
March
going into April, yeah.
Right. And anything you find about, do you think may bring that on?
Well, I spoke to my GP last year because I was having problems with my sinuses, and he thought I might have allergies. I was having problems with my ears as well. He thought I might have seasonal allergies. So when you're coming into springtime, there's a lot more pollen in the air. And because you've got that combination of increasing warmth and you still got all of the moisture, there's a lot more mold, there's a lot more fungus. And then I read something interesting recently, and it was spring cleaning. Now, I'm a huge fan of spring cleaning. I sort of, as soon this time of year when there's a lot more light in the mornings, a lot more light on the night, I get this urge to clean. And actually, I'd not really thought about it before, but you are kind of unsettling lots of dust, lots of dirt, and if you do have allergies and stuff like fungal spores have settled in your house and then you're riving everything about, there might be some kind of trigger in there.
That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I don't spring clean because I'm a bloke, and I don't have this mania about cleaning. That might explain why my March and April aren't so bad. But I think there's a possibility that you're onto something there, especially with, what do we call it, hay fever and things like that can cause people to be bunged up. And I've always thought, I wonder if that causes a sort of strange sort of reaction with people. I'm not aware of any research that's been done into it, and I'm not aware of any research that is being done into it. I think it's been overlooked. But another thing that I spoke to a sleep specialist, Alistair Henry, who did his doctorate at Manchester University, and I asked him, what does he think about the clocks changing? And I had this major thing about clocks. And it's a bizarre one, I think, because it shouldn't really matter, clocks changing. But I really struggle to cope when the clocks change. Like, it throws my sleeping patterns out. I get confused with what time it is. I'm waking up at strange hours of the night. I'm going to bed like later than I should be. I'm going to bed earlier than I should be. And it takes me a good month for me to settle back down to a normal pattern again. And I think maybe the stress caused by that little 1 hour change could be something to do with it, because our bodies are thinking, whoa, we just got used to us getting up at 6:30. Now you want to get up at 5:30. What are you doing to me? And I don't know if that makes sense to you. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it makes complete sense, doesn't it? Because sleep helps. When we're asleep, our body fixes itself. It's quite anti-inflammatory. So if you're having disjointed sleep and you're not getting that really deep sleep that you get sort of around between 12 and 2, then, yeah, it makes sense that it would cause additional stress. And we all know that stress and psoriasis are excellent bedmates.
Yeah, I've never been particularly a stressed out person, but it's when the clocks change, I sort of like have a few weeks of like mania where everything's just out of sync. And then once it's settled down again, I'm fine. But when I spoke to Alistair, he said to me, there's nothing really why it should matter, because all you're doing it's just a clock. It doesn't really make any sense, because we have our natural body clocks, don't we, and our rhythms of things. So are we becoming slaves to time and things? I don't know. It's just something that I've always thought there's a possibility that it just drives me nuts. I'd love for us to go back to where clocks don't change anyway, but that's just a personal point.
The thing is, though, we are all different, and
yeah,
like, doctors are taking an average from research that they've done, but you already know from your personal experience that it unsettles you. So it wouldn't be unsurprising if in your personal circumstance it unsettles your psoriasis as well. Yeah,
definitely. I think it just adds to the thing. And that's why I think the winter one, when the clocks, they go back in winter, don't they, not forward. I get confused which way they go. But the October one, because they go back and all of a sudden it's darker at nights and what have you. So your fire goes on earlier, your central heating goes on earlier, it's getting colder, you tend to start wearing more clothes. And I think they're all contributing factors to it. As I definitely know that come October, I absolutely dread it, because I'm thinking, no, please. And then I think that that's maybe also a factor in it, that I'm fearful of it, because it's happened so many times before. I'm thinking the worst is going to happen, and then the worst does happen. So if I manage to get some of the negative thoughts out of my head and think, nah, it's not going to happen, I'll be fine. Perhaps it wouldn't, if that makes sense, if we think about that. You get sort of in this thing of negativity about, my worst time's coming up. And all you're trying to do is get through that month, like thinking, please, don't. And you're worrying about it when really you shouldn't. It sounds daft, isn't it? But you can't help what you are, can you?
No, not at all. And with the spring thing, I think that's doubly the same, because when it gets to March, I start stressing, because March is the month where things have normally gone wrong for me in the past. But then I think for some people, it's also a stressful time because they're thinking, oh, my psoriasis is getting worse or it's going to get worse, but it's also getting hotter and I need to wear shorts and T-shirts and what am I going to wear? And my skin is really bad. And then you stress yourself out more. So it's kind of, in some cases, it can be a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. It does, doesn't it? You know, I've never thought of it from the March point of view because I've not really had that many March flares, but yeah, you're changing your wardrobes around. Your big woolly jumpers and big coats are going back in the wardrobe, and your sort of shorts and your T-shirts are coming out. But for many years, I've not really worn shorts and T-shirts, so I don't think I've really particularly thought about that one. But I can see it being a stressful factor. I think, especially for you ladies who like if we're wearing dresses and things, and I mean for blokes, I think it's always been a bit easier. We just put a pair of jeans on, but. Yeah, maybe that sounds like misogynist or anything, I don't know. But yeah, I can get why that'd be stressful, you know. And because you want to look good in summer, don't you? You want to get a bit of colour in your face. And, you know, I mean, I think I've got a bit of colour in my face now, so I just come back off holiday and I feel better for it. So you want to do that. You want to feel good, you know. So maybe I think that's a really good point you made there, really good point. Any other points you think about March? Why?
I don't know if there might be some kind of dietary component because we shift our diets quite a lot when it comes to sort of March time. You know, we're coming out of the wholesome stews and soups into more warmer food, more warmer weather foods. And I don't know if maybe there's a food trigger in there somewhere.
Yeah, that's a possibility as well, isn't it? You know, my diet doesn't really change that much, but you're right. In the winter, I would probably tend to eat more curries than in the summer. You know, with my dietary the way it is, yeah, I'd probably end up having a vindaloo or a dress in the winter, where I probably wouldn't particularly in the summer. But yeah, your diet would change, and also yeah, your habits change, don't they? You sort of my drinking habits change, and I don't drink anywhere near like what I used to. But in the summer, you're more likely to like. Sit outside a pub and have 3 or 4 pints, where in the winter you're not going to sit outside a pub. You might just pop in and maybe have one and go home, or not bother at all because it's too cold to go out. So that might have, well, that will have something to do, because you shouldn't drink alcohol anyway. I think we all know that. But we've got to live a life, haven't we? But yeah, dietary changes. It's something, an area that I'm not well up on at all, but I know that there's going to be a podcast coming up where it'll all be explained, and maybe a light bulb will go on in my head and I'll have this whole new diet laid out for me and things will be wonderful. But I'm a simple man, Gemma. You know, I'm happy with a bag of chips.
And now I feel like we need to accelerate the podcast interview about food.
Yeah. Maybe I might just have chips, and that's the reason why it's been so bad for me for the last 25, 30 years. So do you never get bad in October then?
I do get worse, but it's normally the triggers are really obvious, so it aligns up with the heating going on. So it's more my skin drying out than my body rebelling against itself.
Right.
And dehydration, because I definitely drink more water in the summer. And I read something really interesting this year because I was researching an article, and I didn't realize that we're more likely to be dehydrated in the winter than we are in the summer. And the reason is because it's cold, we don't feel like we need to drink as much water, but we also don't notice how much we sweat. Because we've got so many clothes on, we actually sweat quite a lot, but we're not as aware of it because of the humidity of the air.
That's really interesting. That I'd never ever considered that. I always try and drink plenty of water anyway. I sort of had it drummed into me in the early days of going into hospital and drink so much a day. And I do drink water in the winter, but in the winter when I wake up, I will probably have 2 like big mugs of coffee rather than 1. And if we get in and it's cold, you'll have a warm drink rather than water. Whereas in the summer, I will drink probably a coffee in the morning and then it'll be water for the rest of the day. So it would be a slight change. But yeah, that makes sense to me. And obviously the clothing. Big, like, sweating. I don't know really if I sweat. Well, probably must do, but you can't smell yourself, can you? So I don't know. I hope somebody, if I do smell somebody, that's from the toilet. Russ, you stink. Let's do something about it. Does your treatment regime change then for you? In March, do you tend to use more moisturisers and stuff, or do you just stay constant?
Yeah, so I think it was subconscious. I bought like loads of moisturiser on my supermarket shop this week. And when it arrived, there was like 6 different brands, different types of moisturiser. And I thought, I've got a little bit overboard here. But now I'm talking to you, I think maybe subconsciously it's that inner fear anticipating what's about to happen. So that's quite scary.
Yeah, it's a bit, isn't it? You're thinking about it now. Bloody hell. Which moisturiser are you using?
Well, I try to make my own, but I get a little bit worried at this time of year. And to be honest, I bought a lot because I am just really busy at the moment and I have to be in the right mood to be in the sort of spirit of making things. I try to get things without fragrance in, and I find that quite difficult.
Right, yeah.
So I've got some Palmer's body butter. I think I've got a Dove fragrance-free thing. I really like Waitrose. Waitrose do a range called Pure, and it's got no fragrances. It hasn't got loads of stuff in that irritates people's skin, and it's really cheap. So like I got a tub of body butter. It was £3.33. That's
not bad.
That's not really good, isn't it?
Yeah, that's not bad.
So I got about 4 of those.
Right. It's not stuff I tend to use. I stick with the old-fashioned white soft paraffin and the fabulous new Enstellar, which I think's been the best thing that's come out for years. Because like you can spray that on, off you go. It doesn't stain your clothes. It's been an absolute revelation for me.
Yeah.
But in the winter, if I'm really dried out in the central heating, there's nothing better than a bit of 50-50. Yeah, that slopped on, and I know it's messy and it gets everywhere, but just the beautiful feel of that 50-50 soaking in your skin and that's just heaven. But then obviously you've got to wash everything and it's all over your clothes. But Enstellar's the best thing in the world for me at the moment. I took some over with me on holiday where it has been quite warm, and obviously the only problem I had to go out into the garden to spray it because my mate's place is tiled inside. If you spray it, it makes it slippy on the tiles. So I had to stand out in the garden with his dog going mad while I'm trying to spray this Enstellar on my legs, and the dog's going berserk, thinking, "What's he doing in the garden, the weirdo?" But these are the things you do when you got psoriasis, aren't you? People think, yes, they're all strange.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is quite interesting is the wavelength of light in the UK. So I think it's around the end of September until March. The wavelength of light in the UK is not optimum for making vitamin D.
Right.
Which is normally made when the light hits your skin. So I just wonder if there's a bit of a link there between whether, with you flaring in October.
Yeah, lack of vitamin D. It's not something I've ever been asked, as far as I can remember. I've ever been asked, and I've never taken. Can you take vitamin D supplements?
Yeah, you can. Yeah,
you can. That might be worth giving it a go. If I took a little supplement of it, give that a try. But as far as I can remember, I've never been told to, or never been offered it, or even been told until you just mentioned it about it. That was definitely something we were thinking about. But some of the creams have vitamin D derivatives, aren't they?
Yeah.
Dovenex and Dovabet have vitamin D derivatives, I think, are they?
Yeah.
I've got that one right. And calcipitriol, I think, might have vitamin D in it, or it might not.
Dovenex, I think, is the vitamin D analog. Yeah. And then Dovabet is basically Dovenex mixed with the steroid, isn't it? Betamethasone, which I think is betamethasone also called, is it calcipotriol?
No, it's something different. It might not even be available yet. It might be something from the midst of time that I used. But I can't use any of them anyway, Dovalex or anything like that. It's too strong for me nowadays. I can't put them anywhere near my skin. But the vitamin D thing, that's interesting. That's something to bring up with my prof next time I see him and ask him, because I think it could be worth me taking some vitamin D tablets if you can buy them or get them. It would definitely work for me.
You can buy them. You want them in oil because it is a fat soluble vitamin. And I know in quite a lot of forums, people have had quite good success. Some people have had some good success, but you do want to do it with your doctor because you can overdose with it being fat soluble. So you do want to track that with blood tests. And then again, because you're on biologics, you need to double check.
Yeah, of course.
There's no interactions there. So definitely bring it up. It's certainly worth investigating, isn't it? Especially if the mainstay diet is chips.
I do occasionally have something different from chips. Have curry with them. Well, yeah, I will mention that to my prof next time I'm in clinic. Is it worth me looking at that? So I never thought that about the light at all. But that's a great point. Great point. Oh, go on then.
I was going to ask you. You mentioned earlier that you go into hospital quite a lot in October, but in recent years it's not been as bad. Is there something that you've changed in recent years, or is it just something you've observed but you haven't intentionally changed anything?
I think it's a success of the biologics. As they've got better, my hospital visits have become less frequent, and I've not been in. Obviously, I've not been in last year, and I wasn't in the year before. So I've missed out two winters through the biologic that I'm on now. Unfortunately, the biologic I'm on now is beginning to lose its efficacy, and I can feel it. I'm due it today, and I woke up this morning. I've got aches and pains, and my skin's a little bit the worse for wear today. So I know that it's about time I probably changed to a new one, but it's definitely the biologics improving that have kept me out of hospital. Definitely.
Right, interesting, because I haven't had a major flare for the last 3 years, and what I changed was stress. So I was working as a science teacher, and around March time I was quite stressed. The terms running up to Christmas are really long, and then having several young children, Christmas was always busy. And then at this time of year, you're starting to rev up for the kids' exams. So there's that intermingled with the fact that I was in a school with 1,800 teenagers, and all of their bacteria and all of their viruses. So I'm really tired. I'm down, and then I'm constantly bombarded with their infections. I think that sort of physical stress and emotional stress was affecting my immunity, and I think my flares maybe had like a weak immune system point as well, where I was just getting infection after infection after infection, and it was just too much for my body to cope with.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, because we are susceptible to infections, aren't we? And especially strep throats and what have you. But I've not had a strep throat for quite a while, actually.
You'll jinx yourself. You can't say these things.
Yeah, I know. But I haven't, because I always joke about that. Apart from being ill, I'm never ill. The only time... No, I'm not. It's so rare. Apart from when I was on bloody tablets that you had before me for Trexate, there, cyclosporin. That's when I was on them. I had a cold for about 2 years. Couldn't get rid of it at all. That was horrendous. But on the biologics, to be honest, I've had very, very little problems with infection or bad throats. And even if I get the odd cold, it's a 2 day job. The only problem I've had infection-wise is my teeth. As you know, that's the only problem. Apart from that, I haven't. So I'm quite lucky in that respect. So I'm going to boast. I've not had a strep throat.
Wow. I'm crossing my fingers for you. They're crossed right now, Russ.
I'm going to touch a load of wood as soon as possible. I hope I don't get it, because that's the nightmare, isn't it? When you get one of them.
So let's round this up then. Okay. If somebody is stressed about flaring between seasons, what kind of guidance would you give them?
For my time of year, my October one is get plenty of moisturiser, and probably more than you would do at any other time of year, especially when your heating goes on. Use it as often as possible. Make sure you cover it, use it properly as well, something a lot of people don't do. And just try and ride it out. That's all I try and do sometimes. I can feel it coming in. And I think as long as I moisturise properly and adhere to my treatment, usually I'm okay. Occasionally things will go bad, and there's nothing I can do about that. I just have to accept it and move on. But I think generally I'm probably one of the more severe cases, and the people who don't have it so severe, just moisturise properly, and I think you'd probably be okay.
Fabulous. So for people who are similar to me, looking at flaring in spring, I would have a look and see if you've got any other allergy symptoms, itchy eyes, runny nose, sinusitis, and just think whether this is the kind of thing that happens to you every year. It might help if you take antihistamines. You should definitely speak to your doctor about that. If you do need to take antihistamines, you can get cheap ones from your local supermarket. You don't need to buy the really expensive ones because the ingredients are the same. I would also look at other things that you change. So if you're changing your clothing, are you changing maybe from wool to cotton? Maybe there's some kind of trigger in your clothing. If you've got dietary changes, maybe having a look at what those are. It might not necessarily be that you're introducing a new food that you don't agree with. It might be the case that your digestive system works better on slow cooked foods that have already been broken down quite a lot instead of raw foods, which are quite hard to digest. And look at your stress. Like, is your stress changing between the seasons? It can help to keep a food and mood diary where you can more easily track the changes as you move through the seasons.
I think that's great advice. Great advice indeed.
Right. So if you have any questions about what we've talked about today, you can comment on the blog post for this, which is at thepsoriasisgeek.com, and you can chat with Russ and I on Instagram. I'm at Gemma_Bogue, and Russ?
I'm at Rascal MCFC.
And we will speak to you next time.
Bye-bye.
So this is me jumping on at the end, and the reason I wanted to do this is because I talked about vitamin D in today's episode, and being the geek that I am, I wanted to make sure that everything I told you was true. And when I jumped back into the academic research, I found this really interesting paper by Kift et al. It was published in August 2018, so it's really recent. And what they did was they took groups of people in Manchester. So Russ will be really pleased with that. So a big city in Northern England. And they measured vitamin D, circulating active vitamin D levels in the blood over a period of 5 years. Those groups were Caucasian adults with skin types 1 to 4 and South Asian adults with skin type 5. They also investigated a group of adults who have disorders that are triggered by the sun, so people who are quite often covered up. What was really interesting in this study is that most Caucasian adults managed to get enough sun exposure during those periods in the summer from March to September to generate enough vitamin D for them to have enough to get them through the winter. So 95% of those adults. But what's really interesting is over 90% of the South Asian adults were deficient in circulating vitamin D. And this has a lot to do with the pigment in your skin. The more pigment you've got, the less able the UV is to penetrate deep enough to generate that vitamin D. So when they looked at how much sun exposure you needed in the summer months in order to make enough vitamin D to last you through the winter, for Caucasian adults, the average was around 9 minutes with short sleeves and shorts in midday sun. But for the South Asian population, the time was closer to 25 minutes. The other really interesting part of the study was when they looked at dietary vitamin D intake, most people do not consume enough vitamin D through the diet. Now, this isn't essential because you can make it through sun exposure onto the skin. However, during the winter months, it is a good way of getting that extra vitamin D into your body. If you're interested in learning more about dietary vitamin D, we do talk about this back in my interview with nutritionist Sally Duffin in episode 3. So if you scroll down the past episodes back there, you can find that, or you can give me a couple of days and go back and look for the blog post that I'm currently writing for that episode at thepsoriasisgeek.com. And if you would like to read this article for yourself, I've put the link to it in today's blog post. So that's it for me this week. I look forward to seeing you next time, where we're talking to Elizabeth Tuckwell about how you can use artistic endeavours to help cope with some of the strains and stresses of living with a chronic condition. It is amazing. She was so good, and I took so much away from it, and I know that you will too. So I look forward to sharing that with you next time.